absolutely no one. I might be speaking to everyone, but either way, we are checking the sound here inside the 605 from 605 Sports and Live Ticket TV. Here's a rundown of the show. I'm going to do my brownie points, 3 things that stood out to me, either teams or coaches. Jandy is going to have his top performers and his game 1 game ball, and then we're going to go through the 7 classes. We have the Wheel of Justice. Yes, the Wheel of Justice is back. It is better than ever. We will spin it. It will land on a class, or it will land on a question mark. And for that matter, if it lands on the question mark, it means you get to ask Jason anything. Either way, we will make it fun. We will make it entertaining. We will make it thoughtful. Do we have sound, Jason and Dara?
I think so.
I think we have sound. Hey, there you are. We got the comment. There you are from Rocktail Entertainment. Thank you. Again,
sorry about that.
Did what we have to say early on really matter all that much? Probably not. You probably didn't miss anything. We're not fully into the show. But now that we know that we have sound, we will move forward with our show.
I got to make a few comments before the show starts, too. Thank you, first of all, to Ethan Pearson and the Elkton Elks for giving us the helmet. We are accepting helmets throughout the season, so if your team wants to send the helmet, DM me. I'll find a way to get the helmet and show it off, especially if you're having a great season like the Elkton Elks are.
Absolutely. But we got sound, we got helmets, we're ready to go. So let's start with something sweet. Let's start with brownie points for the week. And you know what's nice on brownies? You know the edge pieces in a brownie pan?
Yeah.
The biggest edge piece of the brownie pan this week, easily the Spearfish Spartans. 11 AA, the victory over T, 39-29. I want to put this game into some context. Spearfish lost to T 62-13 last season. They lost 49-0 to them 2 years ago, and they lost 45-12 to them 3 years ago. So over the last 3 years, Spearfish was outscored by T 146-25, and they beat the Titans this week.
Unbelievable where they've come from just a few seasons ago. Remember, they gave up that 100-point game to Pierre, and they were really struggling for getting veteran players. Dalton Wademan did a great job of getting some players on board, and now has become the athletic director and passed that over to Tom Teason, who's done a good job so far this year. And the athletes came out and did a great job. In this game, remember, Spearfish got down in this game, and then they found a way to come back and get the victory. They made a crucial 4th down takeaway when T was ready to score and put the game up by a couple of scores. They got a pick, and then a couple plays later took it down the field and made an electric play to take the lead, and then they added a touchdown at the end to get a 10-point victory. Huge congratulations to Spearfish. Still, the jury is out on Spearfish and T. How great can they still become? We'll see.
Absolutely. And again, Spearfish not only with a victory, but doing it in all 3 phases. They scored touchdowns on offense, defense, and special teams in this game. Second brownie point goes to Hamlin. 44-6 victory over Hanson in a top 5 matchup. And to me, the reason they get the brownie point, every year you kind of see this. You see veteran teams that didn't quite get to where they wanted to go, but they bring a lot of guys back. You look at Jackson Wadsworth. You look at Evan Stormo, Mason Trowbridge, Neuendorf. All these veteran playmakers are doing it early for Hamlin. That's a very good sign for the Chargers.
Yeah, and they do it in multiple sports. Zach Van Meter in another one. You mentioned Neuendorf. Jackson Wadsworth has been crazy throwing the ball, which gives them tremendous balance. We knew there would be some athletes in that game between Hamlin and Hanson. We had no idea how crazy Hamlin could get. They didn't start out with the pedal to the metal, and they came out and found another gear in the second half and absolutely took this game away from Hanson. So all the credit in the world, great start for the Hamlin Chargers.
Yeah, this was a scoreless game after the first quarter. It ends up 44-6 Hamlin over Hanson. My final brownie point, just a tip of the cap to Harrisburg head coach Brandon White. Career victory number 100 in Saturday's Dakota Bowl victory over O'Gorman, a top 5 matchup, 14-0. We'll get into the specifics and the logistics of the game a little bit later, but Coach White's done a nice job over the years making Harrisburg into a powerhouse.
You know, and as the school has grown, the football program has grown with it, and even more. I mean, they continue to get players out. And what I like about Brandon White is he will make every single person on the team have an important job, whether it's in practice, whether it's as leaders, whether it's on the field. And I think that has really shown by how many kids he gets out to play football and how many stars that they have in their lineup year in, year out. So, yeah, Brandon White's a good one.
Absolutely. You mentioned the number of kids that come out. He routinely has more than 100 that show up.
It's close to 200 this year.
It's
between 9
insane.
through 12, yeah.
So absolutely insane. Congrats to Brandon White and congrats to Harrisburg on the victory in Saturday's Dakota Bowl. So that's it from a team standpoint.
Some competition, and just how extraordinary some of these stats were. So let's start with Brookings. Charlie Bisgard of Brookings doing it on the defensive side. How about 2 picks, took 1 back for a touchdown, 3 total takeaways in the game for him, and 6 tackles in their win over Sturgis. Jace Blasius of Wall came out with one of his best games, and again, he did it against tough competition. Against Harding County, a top 5 team, ran for 156 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 9 tackles. So Jace Blasius really got it going again. Do you have sound, Bruce? Okay, I just got a message that we lost sound again, so hopefully
Again, this is all happening live and in color, so we'll see. Maybe you can hear us eventually, but at this point, we'll just go with it. We'll go with top performers. We'll just keep on going down the list.
Yeah, so again, Devin Bueller of Hill City, another guy who has been absolutely just crushing teams this year. He had another test against Lemon McIntosh, came up with 5 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, and a punt return touchdown. Not bad for the quarterback to throw him back on special teams and get a score.
I was going to say, you get touchdowns on offense and special teams, you're doing pretty well for yourself.
Lane Deutsch and MCM got it done against Webster, 33-6 victory. 200 yards rushing. He also passed for a touchdown and did it on the defensive side, so huge day for him. We talked about Dylan Doran of Spearfish. He was the playmaker. Long touchdowns, big plays, time and time again in that 10-point victory that everybody was talking about. 2 big catches for 98 yards, took them both in for touchdowns, and with that special team touchdown that you mentioned.
And we're getting comments that the microphones are back. So again, thank you to our loyal listeners, keeping us accountable, keeping us going. With Dylan Doran, if there are any old fans of the Chappelle Show, who are the 5 best playmakers around? Dylon, because he returns touchdowns and he spits hot fire. If you don't get that reference, well, look up Chappelle Show.
All right, well, I'm going to do that after the show because I have no idea what you're talking about. Let's talk about Great Plains Lutheran. We don't get much to talk about them, but Micah Holing, 42-29 victory over Wabash Summit. He ran for 335, Dave, and I don't care. I always look at competition, right? And obviously not the strongest competition, but 335, 4 touchdowns, 10 tackles. That'll get you on the list. How about Josh Myers out of Sioux Falls, Lincoln? We knew they had an offense last year. He was not as big of part of it, but he did get it done against a tough win against Stevens right away with a 200-yard rushing performance to start the year off. Riley Cheddar of Marion Freeman Academy. Week 1 didn't quite pass the way we know that he can, but week 2 he did get it done. 18 to 24 throwing for over 300 for 319, and he also almost ran for 100 yards in that game, so we knew he'd be good. He was. We talked about Jackson Wadsworth of Hamlin, his second big passing week in a row. I knew he could throw, but he's putting up the numbers to really show what he can do, Dave.
Absolutely, and again, Hamlin with all those veteran playmakers making Wadsworth's job a little bit easier, and then Wesley Whistler for Sully Buttes. A good mention for the Chargers of Sully Buttes in addition to the Hamlin Chargers.
Yeah, Wesley Whistler, he's been a starting quarterback for a couple of years now. Nice performance against Burke, 56-6 win. Big game for him as well. So had to mention all those guys, but the game ball goes. This is the toughest decision is trying to figure out who got the game ball, Dave.
It was, and you already got spoiled because you saw just a tiny bit of it, but we'll go ahead. Who was it?
Well, we had a record-setting performance by the quarterback T.J. Jellis, but when I watched the stats, I'm giving the game ball to Parker Denny. He was absolutely electric running the ball up and down the field. You see him here catching it in the side and taking it upfield several times in the game. He ended up with 8 catches for 246, a school record 246, 3 touchdowns. He also got a rushing touchdown and a punt return touchdown. So the quarterback, got to mention T.J. Jealous. No one has thrown for 300 yards for Mitchell in school history. Well, he threw for 400. So
that's impressive.
He kind of gets a co-game ball. So, hey, Parker, if you want to share this just a little bit with TJ, we're fine with that. But Parker Denny, huge week, and it could be a really huge year for him.
Absolutely. A big 51-13 victory for Mitchell over Douglas this week. Congrats to Jealous and to our Game 1 Game Ball winner, Parker Denny. Of course, the Game Ball every week is sponsored by Game 1, Mr. Janey Pants.
Yeah, Game 1 with your apparel, uniform, and spirit wear needs. And here's a little message from our sponsors.
Thanks to Game 1, as always. And now it's time for The Real Deal, your weekly interview with Mr. Ryan Deal from 605 Sports. Of course, a lot of stuff to talk about from this past week and looking ahead to next week.
Ryan Deal, what I like about Ryan is he will get around the entire state, get his eyes on a lot of different types of teams, whether they're having a great year or not. Last week, he went to see Winter take on Wagner, and that was a test, top 5 battle. He talks a little bit about that, and then a couple of games he's looking forward to coming up this week. Here's Ryan Deal.
Joined, as always, by Ryan Deal, 605 Sports. And Ryan, let's start out with the game that you went to last week. You got to see Winter play in person. We know that they are dominant. They played a ranked team, and they still did pretty well. Tell us your thoughts about Winter after a couple of weeks.
Winter was Winter. They're going to run the ball, chew the clock, play sound defense, and that's pretty much what they did against Wagner. Ended up being 24-6. Not a lot of times you think of Winter, you think of some of these big blowout, kind of games and everything, but wasn't anything like that. And I think that maybe kind of goes to show you Wagner. They got a nice team, got a nice quarterback, so they were able to kind of hang in there early with Winter. But I just think as the game goes on with Winter, they just kind of wear teams down, and that was certainly the case last week against Wagner.
Still a solid number 1 in the polls, but speaking of the polls, a lot of different opinions so far. We're a couple weeks into the polls now. A lot of times we get some more agreements, but it feels like it's still pretty wide open, and it's evidenced by the tabulations that you do, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's just a lot of parity when you look at these classes, and people can will start to dissect the polls and see the number of teams that are getting receiving votes and first place votes. Howard in 9A, I believe, is the only team that is unanimous in their poll. Every other class, there's just multiple teams with first place votes, and some teams that are on the cusp of cracking that top 5. They're kind of on the outside looking in as far as the receiving votes. So I think that kind of is maybe a preview of things to come for us in the media and just fans in general. I think it's going to be a fun season because when you look across the board, I think there is a lot of parity across a lot of these classes.
So basically what you're saying is still a lot to figure out. And one of the things we got to figure out is what is Rapid City Christian after a very interesting game against number 1. You like to break down some of the biggest games coming up in the week. Your 11-man game, Sioux Falls Christian, traveling out to Rapid City Christian. Thoughts on that upcoming game?
Yeah, last week, we talked about that Canton Rapid City Christian game, and we talked about Rapid City Christian's first year in 11A, and then they had to face the number 1 team, Canton, right off the bat. That was a good game. Went right down to the wire. So goes to show you, Rapid City Christian, I think they're going to be right there in the mix in 11A, and it doesn't get any easier. They get Sioux Falls Christian, who is one of these teams that we're certainly talking about as being obviously a top team in 11A. So that's definitely one that I'm keeping an eye on. Still want to see how it goes for Canton, for Rapid City Christian in 11A. So they get another tough one again facing Sioux Falls Christian.
Yeah, both of those two teams got a test against the top 5 opponent. Both passed. Well, I would say Rapid City Christian passed, even though they didn't get the win. But they looked the part, and now they'll face off with each other to see how that goes. So for your 9-man game of the week, what are you looking at as one of the top matchups on your slate?
I would say that Wall-Kadoka area game, kind of a rivalry game, I guess you could say. Teams from the same conference, play every year. But Walls had Kadoka's number. I don't think Kadoka has beaten Walls since 2012. So obviously those guys, Kadoka, they're just kind of itching to beat the Eagles. And obviously that Walls had just a great run here the last few years. So credit to those guys. They've had built a pretty good program. But I would say that's one I'm keeping an eye on. Wall picked up a nice win last week against Harding County, and then same with Kadoka. Picked up a nice win against Lyman, where both teams kind of scored 2 points and everything. So I don't know if that means we're going to see kind of an offensive explosion, or if maybe the defenses will rise to the occasion. But I definitely think that is one I'm going to keep an eye on for the 9-man ranks.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on Kadoka playing in 9B, going against Wall, who moves down to 9A, so across classes, but you're right, Wall has had their number recently. Always love watching and listening to what you do, Ryan. Just keep up the good work, and we'll look for all the write-ups and all the stuff that you're working on here on 605 soon.
Absolutely. Talk to you later, Jason.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks as always to Mr. Deal and yourself. As he said, just a lot of interesting things across all 7 classes. This being the first full week, all 7 classes were in action.
Yeah, there were a lot of interesting things, and I always like to get Ryan's perspective on that. So that's always great to hear from Ryan. And if you don't check out the 605 write-ups every week, they're fantastic. Excellent. Because you can access them for free on 605sports.com, and write-ups from all over the state, so you gotta check that out every week.
All right, you see this big, beautiful, colorful wheel right here. It is back, the Wheel of Justice. I joked last week it means we don't have to talk about 11 AAA first all the time. Of course, I spun it, and it landed on 11 AAA, so we're going to let Jandy spin it this week. Which class are we going to start talking about? Take a spin.
All right, that's the real spin right there. If it lands on 11 AAA again, which is green here.
Oh boy.
No way. Okay, yeah. At least we won't have 11 AAA to start with. We're going to start with
11B.
11B. Congratulations, right. 11B.
Let's go to 11B. Again, it's democracy in action. I love it. At its best. We're going to start with Class 11B. Some notable results. You mentioned it earlier. The top 5 matchup between Winter and Wagner, a 24-6 victory for the Warriors. The 2 and 3 teams, Elk Point Jefferson and Sioux Valley, were off last week. Woonsocket, Washington Springs, Sanborn Central, they were in 4th. They crushed Lee Deadwood 42-6. And then Beersford sneaks into the top 5 after a win over Parker. I don't know how much we learned necessarily this week in 11B, but when it comes to the top team winner, probably the most significant question is, when are they going to be at full strength?
Well, my sources tell me that Sean Hammerbeck is very close to coming back. So when he gets back, I'm sure they don't want to rush him, but when he gets back, it'll just be a different dimension to an already really good defense. They did a great job stopping Gannon Knable, but they're going to be even better. And then they have another lineman coming back, and Ross, who's going to really give them another boost as well, and he'll probably be back midway through the season. So I think they're going to keep getting better as the year goes on, which is scary for the rest of the class. They got tested a little bit. Yep. Wagner played a good game, but Winter, I think, has a lot more room to go north.
And Winter is off this week. They will await Elk Point Jefferson in 2 weeks. If Elk Point Jefferson beats Mount Vernon Plankinton, it will be a 1 versus 2 matchup on September 13th.
And that's really the one that both teams are kind of looking forward to see where they're going to test each other on their possible way for a rematch somewhere in the playoffs, more than likely down to the last 2 games. Elk Point Jefferson did a really good job in their opening game and now had a week off to work on some things. They've got a tough battle coming up, though, taking on Mount Vernon Plankinton this week. And Mount Vernon Plankinton, they've got some power on that team. I really think EPJ is a better team, but a great test for early in the season.
Yeah, Mount Vernon Plankinton, the team receiving the most votes outside the top 5, so you could technically call them the 6th best team in 11B. They will be at Elk Point Jefferson. That's probably the biggest matchup in 11B this week. Woonsocket, Weston, Springs, Sanborn Central, like Winter, is also idle this week. They won't play again until September 13th. Beersford sneaking into that top 5. They got McCook Central Montrose.
And that'll be a good test for them. McCook Central, they had a tough game last week, but did a good job getting the win. and now will really be tested this week because I think Beersford is kind of one of the unknowns in this class. Have been playing in 11A for the last couple of years, moving down to 11B. Not as many tough teams at the top,
Sure.
but the teams at the top are just as good as the teams that they played in 11A.
Absolutely. So that's a look at 11B, and I've already forgotten our rules. Are we going to go to 11A or 9AA? I'll let you
make
decide.
the rules.
You make the rules. It's your basement.
What did we decide, Bruce? Are we going up?
I think you're going down.
All right, we're going to go down.
All right, we're going to go 9AA.
9AA.
Actually, good, because we'll end with 11A, AA, and A, which were some of the more intriguing results. So we'll move down to the 9-man ranks. 9AA. We discussed earlier the Hamlin victory over Hanson. Number 1, Parkston, no problem with Stanley County, 52-16. Hill City, moving down from 11B, 2-0 to start their 9AA tenure. You, however, were at another top 5 matchup. Elkton Lake Benton and Viborg Hurley, 40-24. The Elks with the victory. What'd you learn down in Viborg on Friday night?
Well, they've got a really solid offense, starting with Colt Beck at quarterback, who can throw the ball a little bit, but is also a really tough runner. And defensively, I really thought that's where they shine the most. I think they're a team that still has some improving to do, just like everybody else. But the way that they held in check the passing game for Viborg Hurley, yes, they did end up with over 200 yards passing, but those were some long passes at the end of the game that really didn't mean much. I think they're in the driver's seat, and they can throw the ball a little bit too. They showed a little bit of ability to get it downfield as well. So really balanced team as far as offensively, defensively, running the ball, throwing the ball. I was very impressed with Elkton Lake Benton. And when talking to Ethan Pearson after the game, he said the same thing. He said this is definitely a team that can do better. They did have some spots at the end of the game they could have played a little bit better against Viborg Hurley. But overall, he was very happy with the performance.
So when you look at them versus the two teams above them, a Parkston and a Hamlin, you mentioned some areas they could probably clean up. What's going to set them apart as they try and kind of crack those top 2 spots?
Yeah, they're going to have to get, what Hamlin has, nobody else has, is that quickness all over the field. And what Parkston has is they've got that W in the championship game last year, which makes them very confident going into games. And Coulter Kramer's had 2 outstanding weeks. Last week, they didn't have an incomplete pass in the few times that they threw the ball for Parkston. So can Elkton get to that level? I think they do. They have enough players to do it, but they're going to have to continually cut down on mistakes if they want to be in that class.
And then I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Nice job by the Rangers. You move down from 11B to 9AA. They get 2 victories off the bat. They are up to number 4 this week. They are at Dupree. Nice start for Hill City. Maybe the quality of opponent is not as great as some of the top 5 teams in this in this class, but when you can start off like that, it builds confidence and builds momentum. And we talked about it. Moving to any new class is tough, but moving from 11 to 9-man, you have to completely recalibrate how you approach the game.
Yeah, and it helps to have a guy like Devin Bueller who can move in space when you get to the 9-man game, and he has picked up on that quicker than most people do when they switch classes. So I love the way that they are suited for the 9-man game, but you're right, it's definitely a change for both those 2 teams. So Hill City did play Lemon McIntosh last week, a team that I think is not, that's not a terrible opponent to judge yourself against. So Hill City, things are definitely looking up.
Let's look at some games upcoming later this week. Elkton Lake Benton, who you talked about, they're hosting Freeman Marion Freeman Academy. Hanson's hosting DeSmit. Parkston is hosting Kimber White Lake. Hamlin is at Wabash Summit. And then maybe one of the more intriguing matchups, Viborg Hurley at Gayville-Vollen, a cross-class matchup in 9-man.
Yeah, Gayville-Vollen got that win against Platte Geddes a couple weeks ago, and I think that they're a team that has something to prove. And Viborg Hurley, coming off of a loss, they want to show that they're still good. They just had trouble executing in big moments against Elkton. They just weren't ready for that type of stage. They got to bounce back against a good Gayville-Vollen team. And you mentioned Parkston and Kimber White Lake. I think Kimber White Lake is the team we might find out a little bit more about. They can play with Parkston. Don't be surprised if we have a close game here. I know Parkston's number 1, but Kimber White Lake, they've got some serious players, including Iden Myers in the backfield.
Kimber White Lake receiving votes in the 9AA poll this week. So again, they got 6 votes, so technically 7th in the poll against Parkston. And then Freeman Marion Freeman Academy also receiving votes. And again, they will take on Elkton Lake Benton on Friday.
That'll be a fun one too. So Elkton, no rest for them yet.
Absolutely not. All right, let's head on down to 9A. Howard, once again, retaining its number 1 spot with a victory over Esteline Hendricks. All the other top 5 teams 1 through 4 won. Number 2 Wall over number 5 Harding County Bison 43-22. Anything we learned from that game between Wall and Harding County?
Yeah, I think we learned that Wall might be in a different category, because I do think Harding County Bison belongs as a legitimate top 5 team, but Wall, they played really well, and some of their younger players really stepped up. I think they've always been a tough team, but the skill and the toughness, I think those top 2 teams are really distinguishing themselves. I have to mention, though, Wolsey Wessington had a heck of a game last week, and Moshe Richmond went for almost 100 yards rushing in 1 quarter, and then also did great in the passing game on a defense, too. So don't forget about them. They're definitely going to be a contender in this class, too.
Wolsey Wessington over Dubrook 52-6, and then the other result that stuck out to me. Alcester Hudson putting up 70 against Centerville. We talked about Centerville and their offensive prowess last week, obviously this game being a shootout, but Alcester Hudson, the top team receiving votes, so technically 6th in the 9A poll this week, but this is an Alcester Hudson team that you like.
Yeah, they've got a great backfield. Lopez in the backfield is like a big monster, and then they've got some speed to complement him. And they lost week 1 against Howard, so don't put too much emphasis on that game. That was a tough way to start the season against Howard. And for them to get down, or they got ahead early on Centerville, and then got down on Centerville, and then came back and absolutely put it into another gear. I think Alcester Hudson, playing a tougher schedule this year, is going to be more ready for the playoffs this year than they have been in the past.
Alcester Hudson receiving 5 votes in the Class 9A poll. Some games to look ahead to this upcoming weekend. Dubrook is at number 1 Howard. Wall is at Kadoka area. That's a cross-class matchup.
That's the one Ryan Dale was talking about.
Absolutely, where he said Kadoka hadn't beaten them since 2012, so that should be very interesting. Warner hosts Ipswich, and Wolsey Wessington hosting Castlewood.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to see where Kadoka's at. I'm not going to judge them too much on how they do against Wall, because, like I said, I think Wall put themselves in a different category, and now they're playing a 9B team who's not ranked. I don't expect Kadoka to go in and win, but if they can go in and have some good possessions, make a few stops, I think they're going to gain some confidence and be one of those teams in 9B to watch out for.
And again, Howard, number 1 Howard hosting Dubrook area. Dubrook has just faced some tough opponents the first couple of weeks of their season. We'll see if Howard can move to 3-0. Moving on down to 9B. Just not a lot of surprises in 9B, and kind of to be expected. Avon, no issue with the newcomers, Sioux Falls Lutheran, 58-8. Faulkton, they had their first game of the season. They doubled up Ipswich, 28-14. Corsica Stickney over Scotland Menno. Del Rapids St. Mary over Irene Wakanda. Sully Butte's going into the top 5 with a big victory over Burke. Kadoka receiving votes. They crushed Lyman, and so you were intrigued by that Kadoka-Wall matchup that we just discussed. Anything else stick out to you in 9B?
I like Corsica Stickney. They got a win against Scotland Menno, and Scotland Menno had just come off of a big win to open their season against Gregory. So Corsica Stickney might be this team that we're not talking as much about. Waylon Bowl had another big week. He had a throwing touchdown as well as rushing for over 156 yards, and he is definitely the focal point of this Corsica Stickney offense. So when he comes out and still performs with getting so much emphasis on him, I like the Jaguars as a potential team to head toward the north part of these class standings.
Waylon Bowl, a top performer of yours each of the first 2 weeks for Corsica Stickney. As I mentioned, Avon, really no issues. The other result that was just kind of intriguing, the newcomers in 9B, Canastota, Coleman Egan, that was a 12-6 game. A little surprising considering the offensive prowess we could see from both teams.
Yeah, and I still think those 2 teams could be top 5 type teams before the year's over, so I'm still unsure where to rank those 2 teams after 2 really tough weeks for both of those guys. And then also I want to mention Del Rapids St. Mary is a team who got off to a little better start than I was assuming they would. So for them to get off to a strong 2-0 start, 2 really strong games, congrats to the Cardinals.
And then looking ahead to games this upcoming weekend, Harriet Selby is at number 2 Faulkton.
That'll be interesting.
That will be very interesting. Harriet Selby receiving votes in the 9B poll. We mentioned the Wall-Kadoka matchup. And then Avon hosting number 1 Burke. Avon just keeps on trucking.
Yeah, Avon, they're that team. I was talking about different teams in different stratospheres. I think that they're going to continue to pull away from 9B as the season goes on. But like you mentioned in the first show, we've had different champions in 9B for a lot of years in a row.
Yep.
It's hard to stay healthy, but right now Avon looks head and shoulders above the rest of the class.
Yep, no repeat champion in 9B since 03-04. It has literally been 20 years since we have had a repeat champion in Class 9B. So now we go all the way back to the top to 11 AAA. And we talked about at the very beginning, Brandon White getting victory number 100 as head coach of Harrisburg. That was the AAA game on Saturday, one of them on Saturday, 14-0 over O'Gorman in the Dakota Bowl. Bit of a rusty start for both offenses, but these are two very different teams than they were last season.
I agree. I think these teams look a little bit different. The offensive line definitely went toward Harrisburg. Josiah Hines looked good running the football for Harrisburg. Not as smooth in the passing game. They really focused on Braden Feldy, which is to be expected. He's a really good receiver for Harrisburg. But I think that passing game is going to grow throughout the year. Sam Knuth at times looked really good in that game. Sometimes felt a little pressure from O'Gorman's defense, who's really going to be a good defensive team, I think, this year. So for them to hold Harrisburg to just a couple of scores, I think O'Gorman's got to feel really good after the way they started the season off against the number one team in the state.
And, of course, that fourth down stop in the fourth quarter by Harrisburg, that goal line stand on O'Gorman when I believe it was still a 7-0 game, or it might have been 14-0, but either way, they prevented it from being a one-possession game late.
Yeah, exactly, and that's, again, a great testament to the Harrisburg defense, who went up and put up a shutout against O'Gorman. I know that they're down a little bit. O'Gorman, my general observations is Talon Black played quarterback the whole game. He came in, had really looked good at times, wasn't able to distribute the ball as much as he had hoped he was going to. Sully Schlimgen came up with a couple big plays, but again, as the season goes on and as Talon Black improves, this could be a team we're talking about, as we usually do, in November.
Harrisburg and O'Gorman certainly teams to keep an eye on as we progress through the season. O'Gorman is going to face Lincoln this week at home. Meanwhile, Harrisburg is at home against Sioux Falls, Washington in the Tiger Bowl on Saturday. And speaking of Washington, our thoughts go to Devion Bonwell-Woody. He fractured his knee. He posted on Twitter that he's going to be done this season. And we had talked about it each of the past 2 weeks, how his transfer from Brandon Valley to Washington, simply from a playmaking perspective, simply from a football perspective, was going to probably open up this Warrior offense, and now all of a sudden, one game in, Washington has to recalibrate.
Yeah, that's definitely a tough blow to the Washington team, but the way that they spread the offense out, even during that Brandon game, with so much emphasis on Devion Bonwell-Woody, and Jace Woods got involved, and Thompson really spread the ball around, I think they're going to be okay. I mean, obviously, you're going to be a better team when Devion Bonwell-Woody is involved to really distract you from doing what you're doing. But defensively, I really liked what Washington brought to the table. Dante Smith and the rest of those defenders did a pretty good job throughout the night. But yeah, it's going to be tough without Whitty on the team.
And that game on Saturday ended up being a 20-7 victory for Brandon Valley. So Washington hung in there even after losing Bonwell-Woody early. He tried to give it more of a go, but he clearly was not 100%. What'd you take away from what the Lynx did?
Yeah, the Lynx, the big question was Briggs Knutson, right? And he came in and did a pretty good job at quarterback. Landon Delaney was absolutely electric. And every time this guy has a chance to make a play, he makes the play and changes the game. Offensively, I don't know what they would have done without Delaney, but they can run the ball. They need a little bit more balance as the season goes on to trust in Briggs Knutson. But defensively, Hudson Parliament and that defensive line they were putting some pressure on the Washington line all game long. But I love the coaching in that game, the little cat and mouse back and forth. No team was really able to take the other team out of what they wanted to do. So it'll be interesting. I think both those teams have to be fairly happy with how that game ended. And Brandon Valley, I mean, they could be really good this year if they put it all together.
And then the only other top 5 team we didn't mention, Sioux Falls Lincoln, went out west, took care of business against Rapid City Stevens, 55-7.
Yeah, and Brody Schaefer got the start at quarterback. We were unsure. I was unsure after I talked to Jared Fredenberg, who was going to start at quarterback this year. He threw a couple of touchdowns, but he told me that Josh Myers was going to be a huge part of this season and the running game for Lincoln. And boy, was he right. 200 yards rushing. He absolutely controlled that game from the line of scrimmage on down. don't put your head down, Stevens. I still think you have a chance to be a team that's, fighting right in the middle of that 11 AAA bracket, but a tough way to start the season.
Sioux Falls Jefferson in a cross-class matchup over Watertown, 38-7, and then Sioux Falls Roosevelt with a tight one against Rapid City Central at Howard Wood Field.
I expected both these teams to fight, and they did, and I thought it would be important for one of those teams to get a win because that's going to be one of their few opportunities this year to get a win. So huge win for Roosevelt, and way to start the season with a new coach in Jason Stallheim.
Games to look forward to this week. We got the Rushmore Bowl. Brandon Valley is going to be at Rapid City Stevens, and then Spearfish, who we'll talk about in just a moment, they're going to be at Rapid City Central. Roosevelt and Jefferson, Washington and Harrisburg on Saturday in the Tiger Bowl, and then probably the biggest matchup is Lincoln O'Gorman on Friday night.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun to see. Again, if O'Gorman loses, they're out to an 0-2 start. You never want to be in a hole like that in 11 AAA and trying to dig back and get your home field advantage as we get toward the end of the season. So a huge game for them. But Lincoln is the real deal, and we saw it. They're going to be tough to beat.
All right, that's your look at 11 AAA. Moving on down to AA. See, it's helpful to have the wheel in front of us to remind us what exactly we're talking about. I mentioned the Spearfish victory off the top against T. Scored in all three phases, put it in context versus what Spearfish had done against T each of the past 3 seasons. But looking forward beyond this, they got Rapid City Central this week. This is a team they've played well against in past Rushmore Bowls.
Yeah.
Just what's your outlook for the Spartans? I mean, I know it's just one game, but how can they use this as maybe a springboard to be in the discussion in AA?
This is one of those portions of the show you can use against me in a couple of weeks because we don't know. We don't know how good Spearfish is going to be yet, and I'm not ready to give them enough credit to be the number 3 team in 11 AA, which they get in the
poll this week. Yep.
I watched them play though, and they are going to be competitive because they have big playmakers, and they've had big playmakers before. Remember, Dale Hoyd was one of their big playmakers, but now they've got some support, a good quarterback, decent size on the line, and then they made big plays. Dylan Doran was absolutely electric in that game, but is he going to get 3 long touchdowns every game? I'm not sure. And T area, I think a couple of weeks from now, you're going to see them really dial into what they do well, and they're going to be a different team as well. So I'm not getting front seat tickets on the train quite yet. I'm going to sit in the back and wait to move up seats with Spearfish a couple weeks.
Using the train analogy, I like it. Now, for full disclosure, you and I both vote in this poll.
Yes.
I thought it was ludicrous that T dropped all the way out of the top 5 because this was a back-and-forth game. Spearfish got out to a 14-0 lead. T came back. And the Spearfish victory, again, all credit to them, but the final margin was on a 99-yard pass play with a broken coverage. So, I mean, it's tough to say for me exactly what it means in the larger context. I just think it's a good thing for Spearfish. I think it can give them momentum. I think it can be a springboard, but like you, we'll see, I guess. It's only one game.
I agree that both those two teams need to stay considered, but for me, I really like what Watertown and Aberdeen Central did, even in their losses. Mm-hmm. So, Aberdeen Central taking on the 7-time champs, and then Watertown taking on an 11 AAA team, and I thought they both showed signs of being a top 5 team. So it was really hard to decide who to take out of that top 5. So I understand why T is out, but yeah, I definitely see them back in the top 5 here soon.
Let's delve a little bit further into the Golden Eagles against Pierre. It was a 20-14 game. It was in Aberdeen. Probably closer than most people would expect. Aberdeen Central, they've played Pierre close in the past. In the semifinals a couple years ago, I think it was 22 or 21. It was a touchdown game. What did you take away from this? Because I think when you hear 7-time defending champions, you kind of expect Pierre to roll everyone, but this was closer than expected.
Yeah, I think Aberdeen Central has some speed on the outside that people are going to have to watch out for. But Pierre, not since McGuire-Raskey have they had a team that looked like a run-first team. They looked like a run-first team. They ate up an entire quarter, it felt like, on a couple of drives. And, they weren't high-flying, scoring up and down the field like they have some of these teams that they've had over the last 7 years. But they felt like they were in control the whole game, and Cooper Terwilliger got a touchdown on that first drive. And they had a 2-score lead most of the game until the end of the game when Aberdeen Central did come back and make it a little bit closer. So when you look at the scoreboard, you're like, what happened to Pierre? But they felt like they had control, and they were on the road for a big game for Aberdeen Central. So I'm not as worried as some people about how Pierre looked.
Yeah, I don't think worry is the right word. I think it's just more surprising when you see a game that close, considering what Pierre's done in the past. But again, a lot of these teams, it's not that they're not good or not better, it's just that they're having different personnel. They're having underclassmen from the previous season step up as upperclassmen. And you saw it with Pierre. You know they have great playmakers and great families that have descended on down, and they got younger brothers playing right now, but Pierre's going to be just fine.
Yeah, Elijah Bucci is going to make some plays on offense. He plays defense as well. George Staley is the same way, a two-way player that's going to really make some electric plays for them. Cooper Terwilliger did. So they've got some talent. Caleb Lounsbury, first start, I thought he was pretty good for his first start, but I expect Pierre to be just fine.
Yankton, no issues with Huron, 60-0. The games to look ahead to this week, Aberdeen is at T-Area. A couple teams looking to bounce back from some very interesting contests.
Yeah, that one has my ire. I have no idea what to expect on that, and that's going to tell us a lot more about where these two teams are at. And in the past, Aberdeen Central just hasn't quite had enough to compete with T-Area. I think they do have enough this year. So I'm hoping, as a good media person, for good games. And I think we're going to have one in T-Area and Aberdeen Central.
We mentioned Parker Denny, the game ball winner from Mitchell. Mitchell is at Brookings this week. Both teams coming off wins, both teams receiving votes. We'll see if maybe one of them can maybe kind of hang around and maybe be a factor later on down the season.
I really like what I saw from both those two teams. When we're talking top 5 teams at the beginning of the year, no one was talking about Mitchell and Brookings, and they both came out and did very well. So whoever wins this game, they're going to be 2-0 and off to a really good start. We're going to have to start paying attention to whoever wins that game, but both played much better than I expected in week 1.
And we mentioned Spearfishes against Rapid City Central in the Rushmore Bowl. Huron visits Pierre. And then the big top 5 matchup, Yankton at Watertown. Of course, Watertown, as we mentioned, coming off the loss to 11 AAA Jefferson, but now they host a Yankton team that won 60-0 over Huron. Not that you throw out the week 1 games, but those games just seem like outliers for both these sides.
Yeah, I think so. They both had tough matchups, but I'll tell you what, Yankton, Brady Muth really likes some of the talent he has, and they showed up last week against Huron. It's going to be a different look against Watertown, who has a pretty big defensive line and can really get after the quarterback. I'm hoping to get to that game. That's the game I'm hoping to get to this week, to get my eyes on Watertown and Yankton and to see if one of those two teams look like a real contender.
Bucks and the Arrows, 2 versus 4 matchup on Friday night. And we close with 11A. And to me, I think this is appropriate because this had probably the most intriguing amount of collective results. Let's start at the top. You and Ryan Deal discussed it. Canton, number 1, over Rapid City Christian, the newcomers in 11A, 20-16. And Rapid City Christian showed enough to move up in the bowl. They were receiving votes. They actually moved into the top 5 with a close loss to Canton. 2 questions. From the Christian side, did they show that they were ready for this class? And then for Canton, is this just indicative of the fact we're going to see a lot of movement in 11A this year?
Exactly. For me, I didn't have Canton as my top team. I had them about number 3, and I felt like they played about like a number 3 team. And for Rapid City Christian, same thing. I kind of felt like they were a 3-6 type of team, and they played like a 3-6 type of team, had a couple of big plays. Ryan Larson made some huge plays for Canton down the stretch to secure the game for them. I thought they felt more veteran ready for a week 1 battle, and I think Rapid City Christian is getting there. They're getting really close. They've got the playmakers, but they're going to have a really tough test here in the next 2 weeks, especially this week against Sioux Falls Christian.
And let's talk about the Chargers right now. Number 2 team all over West Central, 42-13. Full disclosure, I voted for Sioux Falls Christian number 1 in this week's poll, just because I thought their victory was more impressive than Canton's victory when you look at just the point margin and who they faced. But the Chargers, they were your preseason top pick.
They were my preseason top pick, and it's because of the trenches. I know we like to talk about the playmakers. Rapid City Christian has playmakers. Canton has playmakers. Sioux Falls Christian has playmakers, but nobody quite has the offensive line that Sioux Falls Christian has. Lincoln Semchenko leads the way there, gets all the headlines because he's the future SDSU lineman, but they are loaded up front, and I think in the end, that's how you win games. And to me, that's the big difference between the Chargers and the Comets. Chargers are just going to win at the line of scrimmage.
And then probably the other intriguing result. Dakota Valley over then number 2 Del Rapids, 22-14. That game was in Dells. We know Del Rapids is not the same team that won the state championship last season. So is this an oddity, or are the Panthers from Dakota Valley legit? Your takeaway from this victory from Dakota Valley?
The Panthers have, they've gone through some coaching changes in the last couple of years, and they're trying to rebuild numbers a little bit. They were right around 35 people on their team right now, going against Del Rapids, over 100 people on their team who have had some success. That was a huge win for the Panthers to come out and do that, and especially during the game, had some injuries to their backfield, to their running backs, and still able to get their second-string, third-string guys out there and run the football against Del Rapids. Del Rapids had a chance at the end of the game, couldn't quite get it done, but it does tell me Dakota Valley, their first stringer at least, if they can stay injury-free, we say that for everybody, but if they can, they could play with some of these 11A teams.
Absolutely, they can. Lennox win over Vermilion 48-13. The Orioles were a team you liked pretty
Love Lennox. I saw they got a number 1 vote this week.
They did.
And that was not me. I have number 2. I got him sneaking in there, but I don't know if people are listening because I really like the Lennox Orioles, and a test for them against Vermilion, a good team, but it'll get much tougher for the Orioles. But I can't wait to see how that passing game does once Boston Capser really opens it up.
We have 2 top 5 matchups in 11A coming up. Dakota Valley and Canton, a 3 versus 1. That should be intriguing. And then, as we joked before the show, the Battle of the Christians, Sioux Falls at Rapid City.
11A is going to be awesome all year long. I think we're going to have a lot of battles where you're rotating that top 5 just depending on who loses. But the Sioux Falls Christian, Rapid City Christian battle, love it that it's in Rapid City because that gives them a little bit of an advantage to even up the field a little bit. But I'm really curious to see how the Comets do against such a big line in Sioux Falls Christian. And as far as Dakota Valley and Canton, they're not as high in my rankings as they came out in the rankings, but still should be a great matchup.
Yeah, what's interesting, you look at Rapid City Christian and them ascending to 11A, their first 2 games are against the top 2 teams in the poll, Canton and Sioux Falls Christian.
And they play Del Rapids, the defending champs, next week. So.
Yeah, but they proved they could hang with Canton at the very minimum. So being at home against the team who you and I both think is the top team in 11A in Sioux Falls Christian, I think that's by far the most intriguing matchup, honestly, across all classes.
Yeah, I think that's the game of the week, and that's why Ryan Deal wanted to talk about it, I'm sure. And a lot of people are going to be checking their score app to see how that one's going, especially the nice added interest of East versus West, too, so we can get the whole state involved.
Absolutely. There's your look at all 7 classes. So now we move to the question. Ask Jandy anything. I'll speak for the audience. Will we have sound next week? Stay tuned. We will find out if we have sound next week.
Thank you for putting up with that, by the way.
Exactly.
We have a half-man production, and I'm not calling you a half-man, but
a 2.5-man production.
We're still learning. We're still learning is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
So thank you for your patience.
2.5 men without Charlie Sheen's Tiger Blood is what our production would be. I will say, what's the best tailgate food on Friday nights?
I mean, how can you go wrong with wings? Obviously, tailgate, you want to grill something, but I think you're all right grilling wings. I think that's the best way to do it.
All right, and now to get some more Bulletin Board social media material, which fan section or group of students is the best in the entire state of South Dakota, the best you've seen as far as student section, overall fans?
I'll tell you what, when you go to Harrisburg, the way their stadium is built and set up, the way the fans get involved with the chalk on their hands to throw it up before the game starts, there's electricity in that stadium for sure. And of course, they have a huge school, but they have a huge student section which really supports it. You add that in with the great venue that they play in, pretty tough to beat Harrisburg.
Harrisburg, that is your cue to buy all your stuff from game one because Jandy has just complimented you having the best student section.
I got a question. I got a text question. Can we add that to Ask Jandy?
This is our show. We can do whatever the hell we want.
From Mark Ross. I think in the A class, 11A I believe, there are going to be 1 or 2 losses. Do you think that will be as well? Do you think there's going to be 1 or 2 lost teams, like basically no undefeated teams in 11A? I think of all the classes, 11 AAA, I think we're going to have also a class where we might not have an undefeated team.
I don't think we're going to have an undefeated team at the end of the regular season in AAA. I'll put that right now.
11A, I'm still looking at Sioux Falls Christian.
Yeah.
I didn't look at their schedule. Do they play Lennox this year? I know they did last year, so I don't know if they do this year.
The magic of live TV.
You check that out. That would be the one time I would look at and say that might be a huge test. Lennox is more of an up and down team where I could see them just not, connecting on their passing game and losing a game maybe they shouldn't have.
Not only do they play Lennox next week.
Oh boy! So if Sioux Falls Christian can somehow take out Rapid City Christian this week and get past Lennox next week
in Lennox,
I think. Yeah, but that's going to be tough because they still got Canton and they got Madison. I mean, I guess on the record, I'm going to say I think Sioux Falls Christian has the most potential to go undefeated, but probably less than a 50% chance.
But less than 50-50. I will say, I'm going to say there are going to be no undefeated teams in 11A.
Yeah, you could be right.
I just think that the parity in this class, especially with how, and again, I know you did not think Canton was the number one team, that you thought they were more of a 3 team, but the fact that Rapid City Christian played them close, I just think there's going to be so much movement in 11A in particular this year. I say no undefeated teams in 11A entering the postseason.
Good question.
So, yes, very good question. And I said it earlier, I don't think there are going to be any undefeated 11 AAA teams going into the postseason.
Yeah, we've had an undefeated champion, 3 years in a row in AAA, and this year...
that ends this year.
I don't think so, but it's hard to tell after 1 week, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, the only blowout of the week in AAA was Lincoln over Stevens, really. I mean, you can count Jefferson Watertown, but cross-class, I don't really count that in terms of the context of competition. But yeah, Lincoln O'Gorman this weekend is going to be very interesting because O'Gorman obviously showed a potential to at least keep it close with Harrisburg. Now with a Lincoln offense that looked just as powerful as they did last season, albeit with different personnel. That to me is very intriguing as well with Lincoln and O'Gorman.
Yeah, they've got some weapons. Mikey Roach is going to be really good, and Josh Myers off to a great start for Lincoln. I really like, and then defensively we know that they're stacked too. So Lincoln looks really good, but they haven't had a chance to really show what they can do. It'll be interesting to see against O'Gorman how they fare.
Absolutely. Well, episode 3, somehow, some way, we got it through. Again, thank you for putting up with us. Lack of sound. Maybe you enjoyed the show better with no sound. I have no idea, but
we'll check the numbers and get back to you.
Yes, we'll check the numbers and get back to you. Thank you very much. We're again going to be doing this live every Wednesday on YouTube, 605 Sports, liveticket.tv. Again, send your questions. Ask Jandy anything. We'll go over all 7 classes each and every week. We'll give out awards. If you have any other suggestions for us, like, say, a new co-host, I'm fine with that. As long as Jandy stays on, it doesn't matter.
Come on, Dave. Best in the business right here.
Oh, you're far too kind. Flip it, reverse it. You are the best in the business. So, for our 2.5-man production, thank you again for watching. Producer Bruce Andera, Jason Andera, I'm David Brown. Enjoy all the games this Friday and Saturday, and we will see you right back here next week for episode 4 of Inside the 605.